In this video, I'm going to tell you how to use Chicago-style citations in your research papers. First off, with the research paper we're going to write, we're going to need to take information, research that we've done from other sources, and incorporate that into our papers. And when we do that, we have to cite, we have to give credit to the people who originally published it. And so we do so through the idea of citations. Now, in this class, we use what's called the Chicago style format. Now, Chicago style is used in the humanities. It's used in English, it's used in history, and definitely in art history, which is the subject of our study. When you go to the Moodle site, under week 6, you'll have a label or heading that says Citations Chicago style. And there's 2 items underneath that. There's the citation guide. Then there's a link to the website of what's called the Turabian style, which is Kate Turabian. She's the one who updates the Chicago style format. And she kind of tells you how to list the sources in your notes. Author name first, then the publisher, and all of that. As far as I'm concerned, I don't really grade down if you have something out of order. The idea is that, this is a practice for us to learn how to correctly cite material, because as you continue on in your academic career, you're going to need to know how to do citations, and this gives us some great practice. So if you'd go ahead and download that citation guide, I'm going to go ahead and go through it. It starts off by telling you, why we cite. And it's, the analogy I use is for those of us who have worked retail. And let's say we build a great display, and a regional manager comes in and says, "Hey, what a great display that is." And the store manager says, "Thank you." And they continue on. And you're left in the corner going, "What the heck? I was the one who created that display." You feel bad because you didn't get credit for it. And it's the same thing with academic writing. If we take something that somebody else created, we need to give them a nod. We need to say, "Hey, this wasn't me that came up with this. It was this guy over here." And so when that happens, it's kind of everyone feels good about it, and it's the right thing to do. So we utilize citations to give credit, to give that nod to the person who created that fact, that published that fact. So a couple of the reasons why we cite, or what we do cite, is that we cite facts, we cite information, and we cite ideas that come to us from other sources. We're also going to cite quotations. And we use citations also to help us define terms that may have some mixed meanings. For instance, the example I give on the paper is talking about the term Orient. Well, what exactly is the Orient? Is it the Near East, the Far East, the Middle East? So a citation can kind of help us take a definition of a term where it's not important to write during the paper, but in the endnotes we can say, yeah, in this case the Orient is North Africa. It's specifically Algiers, and it's specifically Morocco that we're talking about. So those are kind of the 3 main ideas of, or at least the main categories of why we cite. What we don't need to cite is common facts. For instance, if you told me that someone was born in Germany or someone was born in France, okay, it's not that important. Or if we have a birth date, for instance, like for Shakespeare, okay, well, that's common knowledge. So we don't really need to cite that. And we also don't need to cite our own theories or ideas. If we come up with something that's brilliant and we write about it and we're forming it in our paper, there's no reason to cite that because it's ours. It's 100% ours. How many citations should you have? This is going to vary on how much research you did and the facts that you're presenting in your paper. Now, for our class, we have a 3-page paper to write. So I'm looking for anywhere from probably 4 citations, which would be 1 from each of your sources. And you definitely don't need to keep to that. I have a lot of students who write their paper and they have one citation, one from each source. And that to me means you're just hitting the source, trying to find a fact, and then fitting that into your paper, which is kind of a backwards way of writing. So the best thing to do is to write your paper, make statements, and then support them with the research that you did. Maybe you're going to have 3 citations from one source, and then you're going to have 1 from each of the others. Or you might not even have a citation from one of your sources because you ended up not really using it that much, or just, having a general idea reading through it gave you enough general information to write on. Pitfalls you should watch out for when using citations. Make sure that when you place the citation number, that it goes at the end of the sentence. On a normal sentence, it goes after the punctuation. If you do a quote, though, the punctuation goes first, the end quote goes second, and then the citation goes outside the quote. And it immediately goes outside the punctuation or quote, depending on what you're citing. There's no need for an extra space. The way to insert a footnote or endnote is to go up to the menu bar, and you'll have an insert button or tab, and you will click that, and one of the options is footnote. You'll click that, and it gives you the option of footnote or endnote. I prefer endnotes because they're at the end of the paper. I don't have to look at them when I'm reading through your paper. Footnotes appear at the bottom of each page, and to me, honestly, they can get pretty annoying. Most of the academic papers these days and most of the books that you'll read that have notes are all endnotes. So that's the best way to do it as far as I'm concerned. Citations are always going to go in number, and the computer's going to set that up for you. Do not, and that's underlined, capitalized, bold-faced, do not go through and change citation numbers. The computer knows exactly what it's doing. You can list notes several times in either the endnotes or footnotes, whatever you decide to do. So if you have a source that ends up being source number 1, it can also be source number 4 or source number 7 and 8. It's okay. It can be listed several times in the endnotes. And again, do not change the process of what the computer is setting up. Footnotes or endnotes go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they continue on. It's also best to use numbers, regular Arabic numbers, compared to Roman numerals. And I think Roman numerals are the default, so change that to our regular number system. It's not going to make a big deal on a small paper like we're doing, but on your larger papers, like when I wrote my master's thesis, I would have like 30, 40, 50 notes in a chapter, and when you write like 38, all of a sudden that's like 8 digits long. So you want to make sure that you just use our regular numbering system. It's a lot easier. The difference, of course, between footnotes and endnotes I went over already. Endnotes are at the end of the paper. Footnotes are at the foot of the paper. They're at the bottom. And they take up a lot of writing space and everything like that. So I prefer you don't use them, but I leave that up to you. And then as far as what you put in the endnote, when you create the note or the citation on the paper, there will be automatically, and I think the Word document sends you automatically to the end of the document with a second number. Let's say you enter the first citation, 1 will appear, and the computer will take you to the end of the document. There'll be a short line, and then underneath that there'll be the number 1, and that's when you fill in the source. And since you've already kind of created the citation on your bibliography, that's why we did it first, all you have to do is copy and paste, and then add the page number, if you use a book, of that source. And it makes it extremely easy. So all you're doing for that endnote is cutting and pasting, and then going back to the document to write in your next sentence. And so it should be a real simple process. Don't let it overwhelm you. Don't let it become more difficult than it is, because it's not difficult at all. So those are really the basics about citation. We're going to cite information that we get from other sources, and we just insert a citation. The computer makes two numbers, one in your paper, one at the end of the paper. And at the end of the paper, you cut and paste your source, and you're done. It's that simple. One thing, though, also on the writing is that it's great to have citations kind of placed throughout your paper. And what I see a lot is people trying to put all the facts into one paragraph, and the rest of their 3 pages is like a creative writing assignment. And it's really, I don't like it that way. In fact, nobody likes it that way. It shows that you did all your writing at the last minute. And good writing takes time. It really does. It takes time for me, and it takes time for other scholars as well. We don't just, we aren't so special that we just are able to write out a perfect paper. Many, many revisions goes through what we create. So don't expect you to be brilliant the first time either. You want to kind of massage those citations throughout your paper, and that way it makes it easier reading. When you start to do a lot of citations, you tend to lose your voice. It becomes the computer voice. It becomes a voice of who created that fact or that quote. So it's your voice that's the most important, and that really shows through in your writing. And also, what I've seen a lot of students make a mistake about is that they introduce a quote, or all their citations are quotes, and it doesn't need to be. In fact, again, it shows kind of an early, a basic research capability. And we want to show more something that's a little bit more advanced. So on a lot of those quotes, they don't sound right when you put them into your paper. So go ahead and paraphrase those quotes and then put a citation at the end of it, because that means you got it from another source, but you didn't use the exact wording. And so that's really important. So don't use all quotes for your citations. And when you do introduce a quote, and a lot of you are really good at that, saying, according to Mark Smith, who is an expert on Egyptian art, he states that, quote, and then the quote's there, that still needs a citation. A lot of people think, well, I gave the title of the book, or I gave the title of the person and all of that. It still needs a citation anytime you use those quotes. So I hope that helped a little bit on your citations if you haven't done them before. And again, if you have questions, just let me know. You can drop me an email, and I'm happy to respond to those.